Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Sanjay. Sanjay, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. Thanks, Tom, for having me on the podcast. My name is Sanjay Sharma. I am the CEO for Roambee Corporation. We are a supply chain technology company based here in Silicon Valley, California.
Okay, great. And for people who might not be aware, Sanjay, what is Roambee? Who are you guys and what is it you do?
Yeah. So Roambee is in the business of digitizing the supply chain. And the way we do it is basically bringing in a combination of sensors, a platform, and analytics, and wrap it up into a form of a SaaS service that can allow us to empower our customers to ensure they can deliver their products on time, in good condition, in the right quantity, at the right location.
Okay, that's what everyone says.
It's the
What is it
holy
you're
grail.
doing? What is it you're doing a little bit differently, Sanjay?
Yeah. So I think when you look at Roambee, I want you to think about Roambee delivering some very interesting business signals that enable the autonomous in the supply chain. So every customer that we talk to have ambitions that their supply chain should be self-healing, it should be contextual and dynamic. And it's easier said than done. And what we do is we basically bring in a lot of raw sensor data. We bring in a lot of third-party contextual data through the entire journey of your shipment, whether it's going from a distribution center to your warehouse, or it's a multimodal kind of transportation mechanism, or you're basically implementing transloading within your supply chain. Regardless of the format and the content and the pattern of your movement, we basically deliver the signals, business signals that can enable your supply chain to be autonomous. Examples would be proof of delivery.
Okay.
So for customers who are looking to automate the delivery confirmation, or sometimes it's also called as at OTIF, on time in full signals, a Roambee would be a sort of a stack of choice where our sensors can detect where your shipments are they at the right place when it was delivered, and derive some very interesting information from a variety of data sources, including sensors, and translate that into one high fidelity, high quality business signal called the OTIF, or called a proof of delivery.
Okay. And I mean, does that then kick off any further actions, or is that just a data point that appears on a dashboard somewhere?
Yeah, it does. So the whole idea of autonomousness is basically bringing actionable information that can basically push or trigger other processes. So here's an example, right? Companies like Unilever, Procter and Gamble, they all are, pushing their products to the Costco's or the Sam's Club of the world. And when that happens, most often they land into a receivable dispute. For example, I would have shipped 300 pallets, and the customer might say they have received only 290, or they might say they have received 310 were broken. Now, in a case of a receivable dispute, the only way to resolve this is to have a single source of truth that actually can tell both parties that indeed 300 pallets were delivered, they were delivered in the right quality, they were delivered in the right condition, on the right time that would. And Roambee basically brings that signal out. A lot of our customers take advantage of that proof of delivery or that OTIF signal and feed it into their ERP. And when they do that, two things happen. Of course, with the ship confirmation, the purchase order gets closed automatically. But even further, they are automating the invoicing process. Because the delivery has already been done, you can automate the invoicing to your customers. And by doing so, you can compress your order to cash cycles. So, customers who have long order to cash cycles, they are in the thin margin business. This is a perfect example where you can compress this order to cash cycles by eliminating a lot of receivable disputes, because the data tells you, where things were delivered and in what quality and condition.
And Are there any particular industries, Sanjay, that you guys are working in, or are you pretty across the board?
Yeah, we have, we call it strong fit industries. So obviously, pharmaceutical, life sciences, chemical industries, food and beverages are sort of our sweet spot. But we also extend our solution offering to industries like the automotive. A lot of reusable containers or assets that basically move in a circular economy, moving products. That's sort of the sweet spot for us. And then we also work with a lot of retail companies and logistics providers worldwide.
Okay, and you're talking about an autonomous supply chain. Are you going beyond proof of delivery, or is that it for now, or where do you fall in that? Because it's a big claim, an autonomous supply chain.
Yes, we think that there will be a new category created, you know, call it autonomous supply chain. And we think we are perfectly positioned to enable the autonomousness. I don't think we will be the ERP or the autonomous supply chain company, but companies will be using our platform to deliver those signals. So obviously, proof of delivery is one example, but think about it, 300, 400 signals coming out of the platform that could tell you things like demand shock. It can tell
Mhm.
you skewed inventory. It can tell you transporter performance. It can tell you route quality. So there are a variety of that signal that are needed to make the supply chain self-healing and to make the decisions. And we think we can deliver those decision-making data to our customers who will then implement the autonomous stack that is needed for their business.
Okay, fair enough. So the signals that you're talking about coming into your platform, are they coming from sensors that you provide, sensors that your customers have? You mentioned third party as well, so I'm assuming you're looking at other things like maybe weather signals or social media or something like that as well. Where do you fall in that category?
Yes. So the quality of the signal is very important for translating that into business decisions. So our thesis is on the sensor side, if there is a sensor in the market that basically is purposefully built, targeting a specific use case, we will OEM or we will, bring that sensor into our ecosystem. And we will drop our own operating system on it so that it can be consumed as an enterprise grade sensor. So think about it as an example of an Android. So Android works on Samsung, but Android also works on Google's own phone called Pixel. And
Yep.
our thesis is very similar. So if there is a sensor, we will bring that into our ecosystem, by wrapping it into our operating system. But if there is no sensor in the market, we will design our own and again, using our own operating system, bring it into our platform. And by doing that, ingesting data and translating those raw signals, sensor signals into interesting events becomes much easier. But there are other signals that we also consume, like data from, as you said, right, weather, route information, third-party telematics data. So there is a lot of telematics data crowdsourced in the marketplace that we can bring in. We also think there is a lot of data coming from the 3PLs. They are bringing a lot of interesting information on a milestone basis, and we can consume that data. But there are also very supply chain centric data available. It could be around container movement. It could be around, customs data and things like basically bringing all of that data in and translate into, what we call it as curated signals or business signals to our customers. And the black magic happens in our platform. We sort of derive and rely on a lot of location related information. And
Mhm.
then contextual information is around the location of where the shipment is.
Okay. What about things like news sites, maybe, or things like that for, I don't know, strikes in ports that might delay shipments or that kind of stuff?
We don't focus on the macro events. Our idea and our thesis is the macro events are available already through different sources. But what influences and makes the supply chain more dynamic is the micro events and the propagation of those micro events in not only your network, but also in third-party networks. And network propagation is not trivial, right? I mean, even we have not cracked this very well in our platform, but I think we are, building those blocks that will lead us to take advantage of micro events, fuse these events into a meaningful business signal, and translate that into how it impacts not only your supply chain network, but also impacts other supply chain networks that are connected to you.
Okay. What about things like there's a big push on now globally in organizations for sustainability, for things like carbon footprint information, which is going to be heavily regulated in the coming years, for things like even child labor or slavery in supply chains. I'm not sure if that's something that you're tracking, but is it? Are you? Is that something that you're coming across? Are you being asked for anything like that?
Yeah, our customers are asking us to help them measure, measure the sustainability within their current transportation network, but B, also bring out anomalies and opportunities to make it even more sustainable. And since we are collecting real-time data, from end to end for the entire journey of the shipment, whether it's a container, whether it's air cargo, whether it's a pallet or even a carton on the last mile, we are perfectly poised to translate that data into emission ratings and translate that data into helping our customers measure the sustainability index within their organization. But even better, have the ability to share that with the transporter, like a lot of market vehicles or a lot of 3PL companies or many other parties that touch this product when it goes from point A to point B, and sharing that information with some of these transporter consortiums really enables to up the game from a sustainability perspective. And we are not there yet. I mean, we are just getting warmed up in terms of delivering emission 3 type, scope 3 type emission data. But there is a lot that can be done. And obviously, it's about engaging with not only our customers, but also the industry consortiums that not only define and develop these standards, but also sort of use the data to calibrate some of these standards in terms of, good to have, must have, or, it should be done regardless of where the industry is going. So we are very proud to be in the early stages of delivering this value to our customers.
Fantastic. Great. And very prominent in the news these days is AI, of course. Ever since like last November when ChatGPT was announced and kind of exploded on the scene, is AI, does it feature in your solutions as well? I'm sure it does. And, what kind of uses are you making of it?
Absolutely. AI plays a role to perfect the data. An example I would give you is not always, we can say with a high level of confidence that, where the device says the shipment is supposed to be is actually there. There is a lot of physics limitations around connectivity and accuracy of GPS and GSM signals. And if you have a wrong location, it will translate into, wrong business events getting triggered. For example, you would have a sensor, let's say, on your air cargo, and it's sitting in a Lufthansa hub at Frankfurt Airport, but very next to the Lufthansa hub is a Delta hub. Now, the signal is not very accurate enough for a variety of reasons, and now the signal will start bouncing between the Lufthansa hub and the Delta hub. How do you really figure out with a high level of confidence where actually your shipments are? This is a perfect example of where AI and ML can play a big role to sort of eliminate this noise and really enrich and look at the data and say, it's actually in the Delta hub or it's actually in the Lufthansa hub and not in the Delta. So that's one example, which is under the hoods, a lot of AI and ML is at play within the Roambee platform. The second aspect is we think, like ChatGPT, it's a mechanism to learn from all the data sources out there. in the supply chain space, luckily, the volume of data and the type of data is very indexed and very tailored. So what I like to call is Roambee or any company's ability to build knowledge models on top of a typical supply chain kind of a stack. And an example would be something like if, let's say, a platform generates an alert saying, hey, your shipment is out of this temperature band and is a temperature excursion and occurred, can you feed that event into LLM type model? And that model can then give recommendations to the customer. Hey, if the temperature has gone up by 4 degrees sitting at Dubai airport, it would be a perfect way to feed it into a knowledge model that can give some very interesting recommendations to our customers. And that's sort of, I feel, stacks like ChatGPT and the likes could be used for delivering, what we call it as prescriptive analytics to our customers. And it's very interesting times. I mean, we can take this a few notches up very quickly. And customers had this ambition of having their supply chain been autonomous maybe in the next 5 to 7 years. And some of these new developments in AI ML can actually accelerate the ability to make their supply chain automated.
Fantastic. And where to next? I mean, what are your plans for the next 3 to 5 years? What do you see changing?
I think the big problem that we think we should solve is our ability to see the impact of a micro event in an interconnected supply chain. So, for example, let's go back to this very famous Swiss Canal example. Okay, I have a shipment, it's in a container, it was on a ship, and the ship is stuck in Swiss Canal. Can I take that event and start modeling the impact of that event, not only on my inventory, not only in my ability or inability to service my customers, but can I now take that micro event and start looking at macro models such as, would there be an impact on pricing? Because the choke point is, for 15, 20 days, who else get impacted, within the interconnected supply chain? So looking at technologies like graphical neural networks and bringing those technologies, combining with AI ML, combining with RPA kind of technologies, and translating that into network propagation detections is something that we would love to embark on.
Interesting. Cool. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Sanjay. Is there any question I haven't asked you that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
I think the a lot of customers and prospects basically ask us, how do we get started? And I think, while the ambitions is to really become automated, dynamic, and contextual, I think you should start with the basics of simply lighting up your supply chain and identifying the glitches in your supply chain and translating that into improvements. That itself will get you 50% of, towards your ambition of digitizing the supply chain. And there are many offerings out there, not just Roambee, but there are very many ways to bring that to fruition. And I think rather than looking at a bigger roadmap, if customers or companies can basically, take this into small bites and translate those learnings into, the second building block and the third building block, I think it will just be very impactful, across all industries. So thanks, Tom, for having me on your podcast.
Sure, no problem. And if people would like to know more, Sanjay, about yourself or any of the things we talked about on the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
www.roambee.com, or you can reach me at sanjay@roambee.com.
Ah, fantastic. Great. Sanjay, that's been fascinating. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, Tom. Have a good day.